Hey everyone, and welcome to Rare Liquid Careers. Today we're going to be talking about management consulting, which is one of the most sought after industries in the business field. I'll be interviewing my friend Sarah, who works at BCG, which is one of the top 3 management consulting firms in the world. And throughout our interview, we'll be talking about how you can break into consulting, what life at BCG is like, and a whole lot more. Before I get started, I did want to let you know that if you're watching this on YouTube right now and want to listen to it on the go, then I will be uploading all of these interviews that I have on this channel as a podcast onto all the platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And with that said, let's just jump straight into the interview.
All right, so Sarah, thank you so much for your time and being so willing to share with us your experiences and thoughts. But could you just first start off by giving us a background about yourself?
Yes. So, well, I grew up internationally in Shanghai, and then I moved to America to go to university. I went to UC Berkeley. I studied molecular and cell biology and business. When I graduated, my first role was an associate at BCG, which has been a wonderful experience. And then over the last couple of years, one of the things that I've done is taken a year of my time from BCG and went to go work at Gates Ventures in our global health branch. That ended like about a week ago, and since then I've been back at BCG. And then through my time at BCG, I've done a couple of different things, like going on a leave of absence, working on like a lot of different teams. So happy to discuss all of that today. And then, obviously I have time outside of work to do a couple of other things. Like I'm involved in a nonprofit called Women in Network, and just have been enjoying really good weather lately. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. And why don't we just dive straight into it? Because I think a lot of people will first be curious about how you chose to go into consulting, especially given that you, as you mentioned, you had a degree also in molecular cell biology. So how'd you end up going into consulting?
So I think I went into consulting for the same reason that a lot of people go into consulting. I was really attracted to the idea of never really doing the same thing more than once. So I wanted to do a lot of like industry exploration. And there's also like other exciting aspects of being a consultant, like getting to travel, and both in terms of like the work that I was doing and the kind of work-life balance that I was having. I think there's never really anything that feels quite the same. So it's always quite exciting. And that was what attracted me to go into consulting in the first place. On your second question, which was around, okay, but you did study something like pretty specific, which was MCB or cell biology. That to me it felt like a personal interest that I needed to explore during undergraduate, but never something that I wanted to pursue, like in terms of going into research or like higher education to get a PhD. Those were just not things that were on my mind in terms of career.
Got it. That's pretty intense to study,
It was
get
for
an entire
fun.
degree on something just for fun.
Yeah,
But
no.
you also did mention something interesting about the work-life balance at consulting. And so I think one question that a lot of people have is, what is the work-life balance like at a consulting firm? Can you dive a little bit into that?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely more than your average 9 to 5. I wouldn't say it's as much as some other roles in professional services, like or financial services in particular. I think a pretty busy week for me will be very front loaded Monday through Thursday. And if we are traveling for work, non-pandemic scenario, we usually travel home on Thursdays, and then Fridays will be in our home office or like working from home, and that's a little bit more chill. I have rarely, if ever, in my experience, consulting have had to work on the weekend, which is huge pro. And so on our busier weeks, when it is front loaded to that Monday to Thursday, I'd say maybe you might work until just after dinner or around dinner time. That would be like a good day. And then working later into the evening towards like creeping into your bedtime would be like on the worst end. And I've definitely seen both, maybe like it's like 60% good and 40% the bad days, the worst days. But overall, like still better than other positions who work a little bit harder in like similar-ish kind of roles.
Got it. So diving into you kind of gave us an overview of what a week might kind of look like, but diving into a more specific day, and I'm sure every single day kind of is different depending on the project and all of that. But can you walk us through what a typical day in the life of a consultant would look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, you are definitely correct in that days will really vary. But typically, I'd say if you're going into the office, wake up, get ready, head to the office. You'll usually have a team check in where you talk about your priorities for the day, what each of you are working on. And then you'll dive right in. I think throughout the day, there's a mix of two parts. There's meetings with various stakeholders, whether it's with your team or whether it's with the client or, I don't know, other people who are involved in the project that you're managing. And the second part is actual more heads down content. So that would be like if you're doing market research, you might need to read different research reports, build a financial model or something along those lines, interview different experts in different industries. And then typically at the end of the day, we'll do a checkout maybe like just before dinner. And we'll talk about what we learned from the day or what we did accomplish throughout the day. And I think those are really very important times to sync with the rest of the team because a lot of the time you might be working in silos for the previous, like, I don't know, couple, 5-6 hours. And there's a lot of cross pollination of ideas and like synthesizing what we've learned. So that's always a really fun and interesting, intellectually interesting time. Then we'll usually, maybe if we're still working in the office, we'll get dinner together. People have the option to like go home if they want for dinner and continue working from home or continue working in the office. Just hang out together because we love to do so. And to close out the day, we might like start putting some of our findings onto slides, prepare for meetings the following day, or set up our like work schedule for tomorrow, and basically get set up for success. Yeah.
Got it. So out of all the things that you mentioned, everyone has the parts of the jobs that they like and dislike. What do you feel like you enjoyed the most as a consultant?
Yeah. Haha, I mostly like dinner, I guess. But no, for me personally, I really enjoy all the parts related to research. I think it's very interesting. We might be testing like a really simple hypothesis, like, is this an attractive market for us to go into? And that has like so many parts. Like understanding if a market is attractive includes getting like building a model on market size, market growth rates. It includes reading industry reports on like headwinds and tailwinds. It includes like interviewing different experts that work in that industry to understand who the competitors are and how they differentiate. You might have to run a customer survey to see how people are feeling about all the different competitors in that market. So I think there are so many different ways you can look at the question, and across the team, each person will have like a little piece of it. So that's why I mentioned that I really like these end of day checkouts where everyone brings what they've been working on and we kind of like figure out the answer together. I think that's what's most exciting, the research to really get to like, is this the right answer?
Hmm. On the topic of teams, actually, I think a lot of people don't know what the team structure is like for each project you work on as a
Mhm.
consultant.
Mhm.
And in general, I know they're pretty lean, but is it usually no more than like 4 people, or like how are the teams structured for each project?
I've seen it range pretty widely. I've worked on one-on-one projects before. I think maybe 4 is probably, it sounds maybe average to me. Um, and then between like maybe 3 to 5 might be average. And then I have seen like much, much larger teams, like where there are, I don't know, 4 managers and each of them are managing like 3 people under them. And those are for like the really big projects if we're doing a huge transformation for a large company or something along those lines. But yeah, I think 4 is a good number
Hmm,
to anchor around.
got it. Okay. And are there any personal characteristics that you think are good indications that consulting is actually not a good fit for you?
Mm, yeah. Um, so I think that there are a lot of qualities that consultants should have or be comfortable with. One is if you like predictability, I don't think that you'll like consulting. And the nature of consulting is like, I think the average length of project, at least that I've worked on, might be like 3 months. So if you don't want to like switch what you're doing every 3 months, consulting is definitely not for you. And then even that's like just when you switch between projects, but then even within projects, a lot of the time you don't have perfect predictability because in professional services, you are dealing with so many different stakeholders, like your team, your MDs, your client, and like all the various people on the client side. And because we are providing a service to our clients, so a lot of the time we might like one client might need one thing, and then all of a sudden another client might need you to run another piece of analysis and stuff like that. So definitely predictability is not perfect. But I feel like everything else, for the most part, you can learn to work on. There are things that consultants need to be successful, like being quick to produce output. That's something you can work on over time. There are other things like I mentioned, travel. Some people really might not like traveling, but you don't have to travel. You can definitely optimize for staying local and things like that. So I think that's like the biggest characteristic that I think would be difficult to change if you really want some stability.
Okay, then on the flip side, having worked in consulting for a few years, what do you think are the top qualities that the best consultants seem to have?
I feel like it changes depending on what level you're at. So if you're at the analyst, associate, consultant level, probably like the best people that have impressed me the most have just been like intellectually like very quick. They drive insights and they understand information and they process it like incredibly fast and accurately. I think that's really amazing. But then as you kind of get more senior and you start to manage people, I think when you get to that role, the people that I've seen do the best are really, really good at just being team players. They like care a lot about their teams in a really genuine way, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But across both cohorts, like if you are even if, between if you are like the analyst who's deep in the data or if you're like the team manager who's organizing everyone and all the people, like I've seen the thing that I've been most impressed by, all consultants are very driven. There are lots of really, and maybe we'll get to this later, like consulting provides a lot of amazing exit opportunities. And so like you could work somewhere else perhaps and make similar money in a role like maybe where you work a little less, but like the people who work at these consulting firms, they're very driven. They like the work that they do and they like producing good work. And that's really awesome to see.
Thinking about, well, as you were discussing, it seems like you mentioned that a lot of the people enjoy their time at BCG. And, you know, we live in a time where people are always hopping from job to job, and there's a lot of job dissatisfaction. So how would you describe the aspects of BCG's culture that really make people want to stay? Because that's what it kind of seems like based on what you said.
Yeah. So I love working at BCG, and for me, there are things that I can't like dive into the details of, but it's like very foundational in the structure of BCG in terms of like their promotion and like financial incentives are built to inspire collaboration. So it's more of a we culture than an I culture, if anything. The details of which I can't disclose, but like working at BCG, I've always felt really strong commitment to my teams, and I have always felt the same from them. Like my managers that I've worked with, I know that they would support me, like, no matter what I want to do. If I want to work on a different team with a different managing director, they will write me a glowing recommendation to that managing director and be like, hey, you need to staff this person on your case. They're going to do amazing. If I want to like leave BCG for another role, I know that they're also going to be really supportive and figure out like, oh, you said that you want to move into this industry. Like, let me figure out who I know there and put you in contact with them and things of that nature, even though like you would think maybe it's not in their best interest for them to lose someone from their team. That's like not how they think about it at all. I've always felt very, very supported by my managers and like absolutely everyone that I work with, which is really fantastic. Yeah.
Got it. So out of, it sounds like a lot of great positive experiences at BCG. Thinking a little bit more about the actual skills that you've built, what are you most proud of having developed as either personally or professionally from your time at BCG?
I think at my time at BCG, there's like two parts. There's me working on skills that probably I already had natural aptitude for. And the second is like working on things that perhaps I haven't been as naturally good at. So the second one is probably what I'm most proud of because I think I've improved in ways that I haven't expected. But they kind of tie together. So basically, like, there are a set of like hard skills that I think like I said, I was probably more inclined to like the ability to like build financial models and things like that and work really quickly and efficiently. And those were things that like I thought I would spike on. But what I found like in the feedback that I've gotten from my managers is actually like that I have like demonstrated really real strength in things that I've always considered myself not to be as good at, which is more around like teaming and stuff like that. Like one of the things that I love to do for my team is make sure that everyone eats lunch. You'd be surprised or maybe not that surprised that consultants, they're like so busy and sometimes they're like not the best at like making sure that they get lunch at a reasonable time. And like a lot of them are like, oh my God, it's 3 p.m. I haven't eaten yet. But I always want to make sure that everyone gets food and like getting feedback that people really appreciate things of that nature, like making sure that I'm looking out for my team has actually been a spike for me that I wasn't expecting other people to notice. And maybe I didn't notice myself.
Got it. Okay. And I want to transition now a little bit more to some kinds of tips for a lot of undergrad or people who are interested in breaking into consulting. And the first question is just based off of your own recruiting experience, what are some of the resources that you would use for case interviews? And are there any tips that you have for recruiting that most people don't know about and be really helpful from like an insider like you to provide some tips that most people don't know about?
So first part of the question was around what tools are particularly helpful. I really enjoyed, what is it, like look over my shoulder? Is that what it's called? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And that's basically a set of audio recordings where someone walks through what a good case sounds like, what a neutral, okay case sounds like, and what a bad case experience sounds like. And I think that's really helpful because the concept of a case interview is just very foreign when you've never done one before. You don't know what it's supposed to sound like. You don't really know what you're supposed to do. So I think that's like a really helpful place to start. Definitely listen to the good ones as a kind of anchoring point. And what's great is also the person who created those casts also points out like what was good about them. So really helpful to listen to. Other than that, mostly just case books, which have previous cases that various companies have used in their interview cycles. And just practicing casing like really diligently. I think it's a skill that you should do several cases before your first interview, before you're really at a place where it's not even that like you want to practice to the point where you're good at them. I think you have to practice to the point where you're comfortable with them, because in an interview, it's like your nerves are so high. So getting a lot, like racking up the numbers is pretty helpful, at least for me. And And then the second question was like, what are some key tips? There are two things that I always tell people when I run case interviews with them. The first is, in any way possible, try to engage your interviewer. So they will probably have done the same case with like 6 people throughout the day. Any way that you can like bring them into what you're talking about. So what I really like to do is I draw out like my framework or my structure for how I would respond to the hypothetical case problem. And I always turn it around and like use my pen to walk them through what I'm doing. And that's just one way to let them know that like I am trying to work with them on the problem. And then it doesn't feel as much of like it's a test for me. It's more of like a collaboration between us. And then the second thing, which also doesn't sound like a huge unlock, especially like if you're good at math. I'm not like the fastest at mental math. But I think also putting numbers in scientific notation so you don't drop zeros is really, really helpful when you're doing math. And then I feel like that can also just simplify the problem. Instead of doing like 4,000 divided by, I don't know, 2,500, you do like 4 divided by 2.5, and then you handle the 10 separately. And I think that's like a really nice and easy way to make sure you get the math right.
Got it. Thank you. Those are very specific. That's good. That's good to have specific advice. And on the topic of recruiting, how important is networking for consulting recruiting?
So that one is an interesting question. I think it depends on the firm, because I think when you get to larger firms, they have very structured processes for how they pull resumes and things of that nature. And I think there's some room for networking, but I think it's very difficult to build the required minimum baseline of repertoire to like get recommended or something along those lines through a networking event like at your university campus. But then I definitely recruited also for like some smaller firms, and they care a lot more because they are small about, I don't know if care more about, but like they have maybe more room for recommendations, or for the analysts might be the ones who are pulling the resumes or something along those lines. And when there's like less of a structured process for how you get chosen or like funneled into the recruitment process, I think networking can really help if you find someone that like you really click with.
It sounds like for networking, then in a general sense for consulting, it depends by the firm. But do you have any other tips in terms of when you're speaking with another like individual, or it's now that you've also been reached out to by so many students, you kind of gave one tip so far of kind of talking about things more conversationally, but are there any other kind of tips that come to mind?
Yeah, definitely. Trying to make a personal connection is great. And then what else would be helpful to know? People who have stood out to me. No, definitely that's it. Like people who have stood out to me at networking sessions have all been the ones who I've never heard a question that made me go like, wow, that's really interesting. Like I haven't heard of that before. Like as it relates to work, I think I've heard pretty much most standard questions. I think when people are genuinely interested in knowing more about me and my experience in a non-superficial way, that is very easy to tell, actually. So.
Got it. And for those who are coming from undergraduate and non-target schools, do you have any suggestions for them on how they can break into consulting?
Yeah, I think the definition of non-target will obviously be different by the consulting firms that you apply for. I think there are tons of really amazing consulting firms, maybe not like the biggest ones, available to apply to, and they do very similar work. So that's one thing. The second thing, maybe this relates to your previous question a little bit better. I feel as though networking becomes a little bit more important also related to what I said, when there's less of a structured process, because non-target schools, they don't have that structured process of like, this is when you apply, et cetera, et cetera. So I think reaching out and networking and dropping your resume will become a little bit more important there. And the third thing is, there are a lot of associates that come in who don't come directly from undergraduate. They may have come from, they'll have come from like their first or maybe second role out of school. So it's not something that you have to do right out of undergraduate. If you need to build your resume or your work experience, those are all things that are looked upon in a positive light when it comes to recruiting associates in not from undergraduate.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I'm sure a lot of people will find those tips very helpful. And I wanted to move away from the recruiting kind of topic and now a little bit more about a few things that people sometimes might find critical of consulting. So for example, a lot of consultants say that after a few years, the travel is not as glamorous anymore. And also there's might be a lack of getting your hands kind of dirty and operational execution. And so the lifestyle and the work that you do might be two key reasons why consultants leave. But do you think that these quote unquote criticisms have any merit? Or if not, do you think there's anything about consulting that you think you'd be a little bit critical of?
Right. Okay. So I'll answer your first two specific criticisms first. The first one around traveling, I think it's kind of true. And like traveling can be very fun and very glamorous, and like especially if the whole team goes together, then you can do like nice dinners in a new city and explore it together if you have the time and you're not, at your desk all day. So I do think that that's fantastic. But for me also, I have enjoyed eating out less and eating in more. So literally just now I was preparing lunch to bring to the office with me because I just don't want to eat out anymore. It's like simple things like that where the joys that you get from working at home or from in your home office may be more difficult, especially not quite at my age, but as you get up there, you may have more and more responsibilities in your home base if you have like a spouse or children. That gets increasingly difficult. So I do think that's true, although traveling can be very, very fun. The second thing around operational execution, I think it depends. There are three comments I'll make. The first is, I don't particularly see that as something I'm missing from the work that I do. I really enjoy very high level strategic work, and that's where I'm comfortable sitting. I think those are the questions that I find the most interesting. So that's me personally. The second is more generally, yes, I do think like there are times when you'll finish a project, you'll move on to a new project, and you won't have any idea on whether or not your strategy or what you worked on was actually executed within the company. And I do think that that is a point of frustration for a lot of people that you wouldn't get if you worked in industry. You'd be able, in one position, to see how a project goes over its lifetime, which has its own satisfactions as well. The third thing that I will say, though, is if you are really more interested in understanding the long-term impact of your work and like getting more of that hands-on execution experience, you can get that in consulting. Perhaps you may need to stick with the same client for an extended period of time to get that. So you need to kind of like make a home with a certain client or a certain partner group or things along those lines. But you will be able to find that hopefully if you make like the correct staffing choices or optimize for that in your staffing choices.
Got it. Okay. Kind of as like another common criticism, I guess, of consulting is that a lot of the top firms that BCG, a lot of the top consulting firms like BCG, they advise the largest companies in the world. Usually you're interacting with a lot of top level management and C-suite executives. And as a result, those outside of consulting, I don't think they always understand why these companies would take advice from consultants who have never operated a company themselves. Also, as you just come out of undergrad, you're like a young 22, 23-year-old giving advice to these like huge companies. And so how would you describe the value that consultants bring?
Yeah. So consulting in general, there's a couple things in general, like bringing in outside help can be helpful if one, you need an external perspective. Let's say that your company, like the board members or like the C-suite, they're divided on something and they want an external opinion to kind of be like the tiebreaker. That can happen pretty often. That's one thing. Second, a lot of the time we help with things that are maybe not the company's core competency. Let's say it's a biopharma company that have done really well because they have like a product that's patented in it, or like that other people can't create in the same way, or like at the same price point or something along those lines. They're really good at like the science. They'll bring us in because maybe they're not as good at the pricing or the management or the marketing or distribution channels, things of that nature. So we're outsourced to kind of like fill in the blanks of what they may not have been good at historically in the past. And I was going to mention a third thing, but it's like completely gone over my head. So I'll just switch over to your comment around like, okay, well, what about people who just come out of undergraduate? I definitely had that feeling when I was an associate. I was kind of like, whoa, I'm advising very senior people. But the work itself always just made sense. Like I never felt out of place when I actually got into the work. Like crunching numbers for them, building a data-backed model or data-backed decision-making case. Those were all things that made sense and they didn't have dedicated support on their side for. And things that like I felt like I was contributing and pretty good at. So I don't know. Once you get into the numbers and the weeds, I feel like that's not a feeling I ever had.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last question for our BCG related questions is, what is your favorite memory from working at BCG?
Man. I think there's like things that sound like nicer, like, I had a colleague once who cooked dinner for the whole team and we like had it at his place and that was really fantastic. They're like really fun things and activities that we've done like in New York and like flying across the country, things of that nature. But like, if I actually think about like some of my favorite times at BCG, like I think maybe this is like Stockholm syndrome, but one of the things that I really like is like there was this one really late night. We were working like close to midnight, if not past midnight. And we had been working on the same problem as a team, like maybe 4 of us for a very long time. And then we just decided to take a break and like eat snacks. And we just like ate a bunch of snacks at like 2 a.m. And I was like, this is fantastic, which is funny because it was like super late and I was like super exhausted and I wanted to go home. But that teaming aspect is really fantastic and what attracts me or like keeps me at BCG.
Got it. I guess you're going to need to ask for some more late nights then to have more of those
I know.
positive experiences.
I know. It's really positive. I don't know. Is that like type 2 fun? Isn't it? Like type 2 fun is the type of fun that's not fun in the moment, but it's fun looking back on it. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Exactly.
I guess I'm a fan of type 2 fun.
And then we just have a few remaining questions that are kind of like miscellaneous, but I think will be interesting for a lot of people. And the first one, I think is a really important topic for women, I guess. And you've been working in mostly male-dominated industries. And so what advice do you have for women who are trying to succeed in the professional world?
I think one really important thing or to frame your mindset around is like you don't have to succeed in the same way that men do. And I don't mean this like is stereotyping how women are and how men are. But like I don't like receiving feedback, oh, like you should speak up more. I think there's a job of those around us to become better listeners and things of that nature. Like I will speak when I have something to say. And when it's something important, I think others will listen. But I don't think that I need to be someone who's like extremely extroverted, extremely verbose, because that's something that other people might be used to seeing in the management room. So like there's that aspect. And then also, I think there's a rhetoric around like, okay, what does it mean to be a successful woman these days? It feels like you have to be able to do it all. Like we already had these expectations of being like great family members, great mothers, and things of that nature. And now there's this expectation added on to be like great career driven women as well. And then all of a sudden you're balancing both. And I don't think that's like the correct rhetoric either. If you want to be successful by, taking care of your kids at home, you should definitely be able to step away from your career and do that. So again, not letting success be defined by external loci is really important. Like being successful is what it means to you. And I think that's like a really important thing to wrap your head around.
So on that note, then how would you define success for yourself?
I think being successful for me is making sure that I make choices that I'm proud of. And that's like a very, very high level, but like in the work that I do, in how I treat my teams and how I treat myself, I think just being proud of the choices that I make, even if they're difficult. So it doesn't like, I don't think of success as like, oh, I need to get promoted by this time, or I need to like get this financial bonus or anything like that. It's more around, am I the kind of person that I am, that I want to be, no matter what I do.
Got it.
Yeah.
I like that. But as you did also mention in that answer regarding finances, I think people are always curious about how people who are in the kind of like professional world and consultants, how they manage their money. So is there anything in particular that you do?
Yeah. My answer is super not interesting. I just invest in general index funds. And this is maybe helpful to know. It's very difficult, or you can't really invest in the companies that you consult for. Or like obviously not acting, you can't act on any like insider information that you might have, but it's not even like the information that you have. It's like information that your organization has. And so when you work at a larger firm where you have a very wide client base, trading individual stocks can be pretty difficult. So mostly it just goes into funds, and it grows at a very nice percentage. And that's pretty much it.
Got it. And then last question is, if you could rewind back in time, and if you could give yourself advice when you were back in college, is there anything that you would tell yourself?
I would probably just be more confident as a person, which is like easy to be like, you should be more confident. But definitely, especially when I first started at BCG, I wasn't very confident in team discussions. I'd always have to like double, triple check before I said anything. And when I said it, I wouldn't necessarily convey the degree of confidence that I had in my work, or how much effort I had put into my answer. And that's definitely something that I needed to learn how to do over time. And I feel like other people might, I don't know, find easy, but that was not as easy for me. And I would have liked to have started building that confidence earlier.
So then how did you build that confidence? Now looking back, like what were you able to do to build up that confidence?
I think I've been really blessed to have managers that have really believed in me. So one piece of feedback that I got very early on, I was working with my manager. I was like, oh, I think that this works this way, or I think that the answer should be this. And he just cut me off, and he was like, Sarah, don't say I think before you tell me what you think. Just tell me what you think. Like, just tell me the latter half of the sentence. Like, and basically, in our feedback sessions, he was like, you do such good work. I know that you've double, triple checked the numbers. Like, you don't have to say it in such an unsure way. And so like really having people believe in me made me it made it a lot easier, I think, to start coming to team meetings with the answer and being like, this is my answer, and this is why I believe in it, XYZ, and explaining all the rigor that I had done to get to that answer.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, that kind of wraps up the whole conversation. And I just wanted to say thank you again for spending time and giving such valuable information to everyone listening or watching. And yeah, so thanks so much, Sarah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ben. Hope I was helpful.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
All right, so that concludes the interview, and I hope you all learned a lot from Sarah's insights and from her time at BCG. And I also wanted to give a quick reminder that if you want to listen to this on the go, if you're watching right now on YouTube, we will have a podcast version called Rare Liquid Careers. You can just look it up on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And with that said, thank you all so much for listening, and hope to catch you on the next one. Thanks so much, and peace out.